Alrighty, welcome to this webinar on remote working, and I'm going to share 5 lessons learned building a 100-person remote company. I'm going to talk a little bit about Exposure Ninja's story and how we built the company purely remotely as we go on. But this webinar is really for you if you have been forced to take your company remote, or it's been something that you've been thinking about for a while. We've seen 2 phases so far of this remote working thing thanks to the coronavirus outbreak and the lockdown measures. The first phase was absolute panic. So businesses sending people home, terrified, don't know how it's going to work, and just basically giving them a laptop and sending them off on their way. The second phase has then been once those businesses have been looking at the metrics and seeing what's actually happening with the company, once they've sent the people off with the laptop, they realize, remote working isn't just a Zoom call every week and a laptop. There's actually more to this. And that's the reason why we wanted to share what we'd learned building a remote company, because we've been remote since 2012 really properly. And then we kind of really grew the team starting from 2013. In the first few years of the business, we tried lots of things and we tried lots of stuff that didn't work. We didn't know what we didn't know. You know, you've got that cycle, haven't you, where you've got unconscious incompetence, where you don't know what you don't know. Then you've got conscious incompetence, where you do know what you don't know. Then you've got conscious competence, then unconscious competence. And I think a lot of businesses going through the remote working stuff right now, they don't know what potholes they're going to fall down. Some of them are starting to figure it out. But the reason I wanted to share this webinar is because there is so much stuff that can and will go wrong if it's not specifically built in to the organization. There are things that happen in an office environment which don't happen in a remote environment and need to be built and need to be given top down. Right, this needs to be an organizational, a structural, a framework thing that you put in to your company if it's going to succeed remotely, because it's not just, hey, our people, well, they've got laptops and they've got the internet, so they can just work remote. There has to be more than that. And we'll talk through. So the first thing I wanted to do is just give a couple of perspectives, a couple of things that we've been hearing from clients and people in our community. The first one is this one. We've got Zoom and Slack. We're crushing it with remote working. Right, great. Everyone's got Slack on their computers. Fantastic. We have a weekly Zoom call. Brilliant. Okay, what they're not looking at is the security implications, the productivity implications. I'll talk through some stats in a minute. But the Zoom and Slack brigade, when they look at their productivity numbers, if they even have a way of tracking productivity, they're going to notice a serious decrease. We'll talk more about that in a minute. There are so many things that this approach is glossing over, which can be absolutely fatal for a business. We've tried working remote, we've tried working in an office, and then we went back to being remote, but with a much stronger framework. And that's what I'm going to be sharing today. So I'm going to help you avoid these potholes. To get to at least conscious incompetence, hopefully conscious competence. The next question people have is, how do we stop people taking advantage of the chaos? So this is once people start to look at their productivity, their task completion numbers, and they notice that across the company, these things are down. Okay, so maybe they're noticing that their team aren't working as many hours as they used to be, or their team aren't getting the tasks completed that they were, or the quality in some areas is starting to drop. Well, this is because there isn't a framework there that gives people the incentive and both the carrot and the stick to make sure that productivity, hours and quality are all maintained. And you can actually exceed the productivity in a remote environment that you had in an office, but that doesn't just happen naturally. If you just leave it to happen naturally, the productivity will decline in a remote environment. The next thing people are worried about is they say, my team is stressed and anxious, particularly around coronavirus, COVID-19, all this stuff going on. I'm worried about them. And they're right to be. The tendency with an office space is socializing. People talk, people mingle, they see each other face to face. That is the tendency, that is the default state in an office-based environment. Well, in a remote environment, the default state is isolation. Unfortunately, the remote environment, the default state is loneliness. So the company, it's your duty as manager, HR manager, owner of a company, whatever, to give your team the framework and the encouragement and to build in the processes which replicate that office socializing aspect. Particularly while people are on lockdown, they're going to be feeling lonelier than ever. So it's really important that your company delivers that. So a bit of Exposure Ninja's remote business stats. We've got a team of 100, all growing completely remotely. It's sometimes shocking to people to know that I've never met maybe more than 50% of the company I've never met. We're across 5 continents. I had to count. We run these internal quarterly surveys across the team. 91% feel a strong sense of belonging and 97% feel it's easy to get help and support for colleagues. Now, I'm not saying, "Way, go me," or "go us." That's because of the framework and the structure and the processes that we've put in place. We've made every mistake under the book. We've assumed that people are going to be fine on their own. We've given the minimal kind of framework. We said, yeah, we don't want people to feel like we're micromanaging them, so we're just going to leave them to it. And then we've micromanaged them. You know, we've made every mistake at every end of the spectrum you could possibly imagine. And that's why I'm sharing this stuff today, because hopefully you don't have to go through that stuff. Before we do, I just wanted to run through some remote working stats. So there's a whole bunch of studies and surveys out there about the impacts of remote working. And whilst I personally believe that remote working is the future, without any doubt at all, it is the future, it's the best thing that can happen to your company. This is what's going on in most remote businesses, okay? So in this institute, REITI is it's a kind of institute of researchers. Staff estimated, they run a study internally, staff estimated they're only 63% productive when they're working remotely versus an office. Now, we've got people on the team at Exposure Ninja that tell us they are 3 times more productive remotely than when they're in an office, because we're using this framework and because we've got all the processes and stuff in place. But default, people are less productive. 63% as productive when working remotely versus an office. And by the way, this is like researchers and fellows. This is not, basic dumb people. This is really high-end, extremely intellectual people that you would think would be able to do their work whether they're in an office or whether they're remote. In fact, they might even be better suited to doing their work remotely if they need to focus. So what's going on there? Well, what's going on there is all the stuff I'm going to show you. But 63%, that's massive. We're going to come back to that. In a study by Thrive Global, 85% of staff said they wanted more support from their employer to work from home. Okay, they felt that they didn't get the support they needed for the work from home environment. That's massive, isn't it? 85%. And we can all persuade ourselves that we are the 15%, right? Yeah, but that's everyone else. We're the 15% of the world. We are the outliers. We're the extreme positive. Well, that's naive at best. 22% struggle to unplug. That's a study by Buffer. They run a state of remote working study every year or something. 22% struggle to unplug. So that's actually the different side of the spectrum to the productivity. 19% suffer from loneliness. That's huge. 1 in 5 of the team suffering from loneliness. So if that was Exposure Ninja, that would be 19 people suffering from loneliness. Now, I don't know about you, but as a company owner, that's not acceptable. Right, so that's why the structure and the framework I'm going to show you is really important. But I want to come back to this 63%. 63% as productive from home than when working in an office. Imagine something that could lose you 37% of your company's productivity. Right? Say your sales team. Imagine losing 37% of your sales team's productivity. Because that's what is expected to happen in a remote environment. That's not that good. 37% of your clients' retention. Imagine losing that if you're a service company. Imagine losing 37% of your revenue, 37% of your profit. So this is huge. what businesses are facing, they don't know it yet, but what businesses that have been forced to go remote are facing is nothing short of a crisis. A 37% drop in any metric in an established company is pretty serious. At some point, this 37% drop is going to have as big an impact on companies and the economy as anything else that's happening, right? So what's this worth getting right to you? What's getting this right worth to you? Okay, so take it from a sales perspective. Just looking at the sales team, what's it worth getting this right? Taking retention and customer satisfaction, what's it worth getting it right? Team productivity, any metric in your business that you can find, avoiding that 37% drop, what's it worth? And again, in a remote environment, your team can actually be more productive if you have the structure and the framework in place to help them do that. But default, you're going to see a drop. Okay, so if you leave it, you don't do anything, you're going to see a drop. If you put in place the right framework, you can see an increase. And like I said before, it can be the best thing that ever happens to you. I would never, ever take Exposure Ninja back into an office. We've tried it, we tracked all the productivity and task completion, and it went down because we've got a framework, we've got something that works really well remote. So why do all of these bad things happen if a remote organization is just, if you take an office-based organization and just put them remote? What's the problem? Well, remote work can be carnage. All of your worst nightmares can come true. So we've had pretty much we've made every mistake in the book. We've had people watching TV while they're at work, right? People doing other stuff while they're at work. So they're not really working. And if you don't have a way of tracking it, you'd really have no way of knowing. You might just think that person was a bit slow, or you might not even have a read on how much work that person's doing because you don't have the framework in place to measure that. That's a bit of an issue, isn't it? In an office, you'd be able to see, oh, they're not doing much work. They're just playing on their phone. Well, remote, you've got no idea. They could just be playing on their phone for 7 hours a day and typing up a bit of stuff for 1 hour a day. They could be outsourcing their entire job to somebody else. You wouldn't even know. So remote work can be carnage. We've had people disappear completely, right? So expecting them to turn up for work, one day, don't turn up for work. Now again, in an office environment, you can see if they're sat in a chair. If they're in a remote space, you wouldn't know until you see that their work hasn't come in. And how often do you check that they're actually doing the work? How do you know that they're online right now? You don't want to have to message all your people at every minute of every day. You can't just let their status on a messaging platform tell you. You have to have another way of doing it. So we're going to look at how you do that. Carnage scaled can be a nightmare. We've had people trying to trick our systems to tell us that they're working when they're really not. Now, that's quirky and funny and annoying on a one-person basis. If that was scaled across the entire company, that is a nightmare. That is a 37% or more drop in company productivity, which for us would be absolutely fatal. For most companies, 37% drop in productivity across the company would be fatal, right? So this is the thing about, while some of the things that we're going to talk about might seem a little bit nitpicky, it's all about these small things which multiplied. So let's say that your team, for example, waste 10 minutes of every hour, right, by doing something else, by having a wander, talking on the phone, playing on Facebook, whatever, you don't really know, but 10 minutes of every hour. Well, that might be 80 minutes a day, right? If they're working an 8-hour day, that's going to be 400 minutes a week. And in a month, let's say there's 4 months, that's going to be 1,600 minutes a month. Now, if you've got 100 people, that's 100 times 1,600, which is 160,000? Or 16,000, I'm not sure, but that's a lot of minutes wasted, right? So carnage scaled equals absolute nightmares. That's why it's important to be very, very strict with the processes and guidelines. Now, I don't mean overbearing. I don't mean you're going to disempower your people, but you have to be tight on this because this is going to be scaled, and it's all about getting people in a good habit, because if they get into bad habits, that's when things really go pear-shaped. I want to talk about the concept of the 10-10-80. So this is the principle that says 10% of people are fundamentally honest. They will die of starvation within an arm's reach of some bread if that bread doesn't belong to them, okay? Right? My mum is one of these people. She will never do anything that is even slightly dishonest. Absolute angel. Now, you're going to have some of these people in your company. You don't really need to worry about them too much because they're not going to take advantage of you, but they're only going to be 10% of the company. And you're never going to be able to only hire those people because it's incredibly difficult to identify what these people look like from the outside. The next 10% of people are fundamentally dishonest. They will lie, they will cheat, they will steal just because they have to. My wife listens to a podcast and one of the presenters is very, very well off. She talks openly about the fact that she still shoplifts just for the kick of it, right? There's no reason to do that. She is just doing that because, this is the presenter, by the way, not my wife, because she has that thing in her where she's fundamentally dishonest and she has to do these things, right? So those people, you're going to have some of those people in your company from time to time. You're not going to be able to build a system that's going to cater to them. So you just have to have enough processes in place that you can identify them and get rid of them. Then there's the 80. So 80% of us are situationally honest, i.e. we will occasionally take something if we feel that there is no bad effect on the person that we're taking from, the person, or more likely the organization, right? We don't take from people, we take from companies, and we feel like we're not going to get caught. So when I used to work in a restaurant, for example, if I was a bit hungry, I might just grab a chip, okay? Now, I don't feel like I'm hurting anyone, but if everyone in the company, every minute of the day, takes a chip, that's a serious issue. So what that 80%, and that's most of the rest of us, right? If we don't perceive that there's any negative on the other party and we don't feel like we're going to get caught, we will do those things from time to time. So it doesn't take much to turn that 80% fully honest. All that there has to be is, remember, if we don't perceive that there's any impact, we're never going to persuade our people that they absolutely have to spend every minute working because the company needs them to work. We're never going to be able to do that. So what we have to do is show them that if they are dishonest, they will get caught. And then that's all it takes. It's just a little nudge that pushes them over and says, right, don't steal the chips, right? Just put a little camera at the top of that thing. Hey, by the way, if you eat any chips, we're just going to see you on camera. We might do, we might not, but hey, there's a camera there. No one will eat any chips, okay? So that's all it is. It's just a little nudge that pushes them in the direction of full honesty. So we're going to come back to this concept later. I just wanted to introduce it now because it's a very important concept to have in your minds as we go through building a remote organization. Isolation and well-being matter a lot. Even brilliant people, the most amazing people on your team, the people who you'd never think would have any trouble with anxiety or problems like that, can have issues with isolation and well-being if you don't build in a framework that looks after them. That's one of the biggest lessons. I always thought, I'm fine working from home. I really, really enjoy just being left alone to get on with it. So, everyone else will be like me. No, they're not like me at all. And if you're a company owner, your team are definitely not like you either. So we have to build in a structure which enables them to thrive. And we're going to talk about that today as well. Like I say, this can be the best thing that happens to your business. Just because I'm talking about some of the dangers and the potholes to fall down, I don't want to distract from the fact that this can, without doubt, be the best thing that happens to your company. There is no way we would have grown to the size that we have if it wasn't for being completely remote. No way at all. There is no way I'd even be running a company with 100 people if we weren't remote. The thought of being in an office surrounded by 100 people all asking me questions makes me shiver. But in a remote environment, that's fine because we've got the structure, we've got the processes in place. Okay, so 5 mistakes. And by the way, I wasn't expecting any of these. I went into building Remote Exposure Ninja just, thinking, hey, this is going to be cool. It's just like working with someone in an ordinary situation. So I wasn't expecting any of these. So if you're thinking, well, that's not really going to be relevant to me, maybe you're about to fall down that pothole as well. I don't know. So I hope this helps. The first thing is inadequate tracking. In an office environment, you see someone in a chair, You can see their computer screen. People are walking past. You know that person is working. In a remote environment, you don't have any of that live feedback. So there's really a few different types of tracking that you need to have in place. Firstly, what are people working on? What's the stuff that they're actually doing? If I asked you right now, if you're working remotely right now, think of one person in your company. What is that person working on right now? And you're not allowed to ask them. Because if you ask them, they might tell you something other than what they're actually doing. What are they working on right now? For most people, they don't know. They've got no way of finding that out. So that's a big issue. I'm going to show you our solution to that. The second thing to track is, are they actually working and how much? Again, when you see someone coming into an office, you know that they're in the office, they're at work. Well, in a remote space, are they actually working at all? Just because their status online says that they're online, are they actually? Or do they have their messaging app open on their phone while they're making some food? Looks like they're online, but they might not actually be working. So that's another thing that you need to know. And the third thing is, how good is their work? Now, you're going to use your current processes for that. Nothing needs to change. So when people are submitting work for approval or they're submitting it to their manager, that's all going to be exactly the same. In a remote space, it's these two first things that we need to think about. So what are people actually working on, and are they actually working, and how much? So let's talk about the first one. How do we know what people are actually doing? Most companies have a fairly loosey-goosey approach to setting their teams' work. Okay, they might have standard operating procedures, but they're likely going to not be as detailed as they could be. They're going to have been taught face to face, which is absolutely fine. But the trouble is that that's not necessarily documented. And then over time, if people aren't working, collaborating on these things and realigning themselves, what you'll notice is that people will develop different ways of doing each thing independently because they're working on their own. So I'm going to show you how we do it at Exposure Ninja. So all of the stuff that anybody does across the entire company is built out in these task lists. So I'm going to show you what a task list looks like. And then you can build this into a project management software. So let's just have a look. So each of these little grey lines, I'm just going to stop this quickly. Each of these little grey lines is a task list that tells someone how to do a particular thing. So, for example, we've got when you become a content marketing ninja at Exposure Ninja, we've got all of these orientation tasks. So this helps people get up to speed. So we've got all of these individual task lists that we send people through to teach them about how we do things. Okay, so that's just orientation. Then when we're running a client campaign, so for example here, if we're going to boost a particular page's ranking, then we've got an SEO actions page SEO boost. So this is a task list which has lots of different tasks inside it. So everything that anybody does in the entire company is broken down into these task lists. We've got, over 400. And inside each task list is a whole bunch of different tasks. So here's what it looks like when you expand it out. So this is one, this is one for link analysis. Where is it? Here we go. So you can see when we expand out the task, you can see that there are lots of subtasks underneath that. And then there are subtasks underneath subtasks as well. Each of those are assigned to a person. So you assign that to a person. And then you detail exactly what's included in that task. And you can have subtasks as well. And then each of those things needs to be ticked off as somebody is working through. If you click on more, you see a full description of what's included in that task with screenshots of any software that you might be using. And there's also a video explanation of what the person needs to do at the end as well. So what does this mean? This means that anybody, and by the way, the team are ticking off these tasks as they're going through. So this means that anyone on the team can jump into a particular person's work and they can see how far they've got down the list. They know exactly the process that person has used on this task. Everyone's working from the same process. So it's really easy for someone to either sub in, right? So they can jump in and get that thing completed, or for them to just get a quick read on, oh, there's Anne, and that's how far she is through that particular task, right? So this kind of documentation and this kind of task list process means that you have no reason to know no reason to not know what anybody is working on or what anybody has worked on throughout the entire company. They also track the time as they're going through each task, so we know exactly how long each thing is taking. So this gives us a really granular view, if we want it, of what everyone in the company is working on. Now, that's not to say that we're sitting over everyone's shoulders, metaphorically online, looking at how far they're getting through their task list at all times. But if there is an issue, or we need to check in with someone, we can see exactly where they're at, the tasks that are assigned to them, the tasks that are overdue. We know everything about the work that is being carried out, which is really important. So I wouldn't have wanted to grow Exposure Ninja, and before we had really solid task lists like this, it was a complete nightmare. We didn't have much transparency on what people were working on. We had some people that were really productive, others that weren't. We didn't know the difference. We had people using different processes. Absolute chaos. But this sort of structured approach, and this takes work, but with a few simple methods like getting your team to document the stuff, having a nice organized project management software that you're using, you can build this stuff in a matter of months, and that does loads of things. It means that your team are working on the same stuff. It makes your company more valuable if you wanted to sell it in future. You know, all those types of things. It's really, really powerful, and it's completely necessary in a remote working environment. The next thing I want to talk about is team tracking. So that's what they're working on. The next thing is how much are they working? You need a team tracker in place. You need to have some piece of software that sits on the computer and monitors how much people are working. They check in, they check out, and it takes screenshots. So some people are a little bit cautious about this. They start saying, oh, Tim, that sounds really big brother-ish. It sounds like we're just kind of snooping on people. If it's not presented right, your team feel disempowered. Absolutely. I was talking to my brother who works in an oil company. They make the connectors on oil rig drill bits, basically. And they sent all their team home, and I said, are they using any tracking? And he said, no. No, we don't use any team tracking. We work on mutual trust. We prefer to work on mutual trust. I said, that's not going to last. That will not last. Having team tracking doesn't mean that you don't trust your people. Just in the same way that when they come into the office and you see them sat there in the chair, just because you look at them to check that they're in the chair doesn't mean that you don't trust them. This isn't about trust. This isn't, mutually exclusive to trust at all. This is about building a framework that allows the entire company to be trusted and to work remotely. Okay, so if you don't position this in the right way, your team feel disempowered for sure. And if you don't have a way of managing it, which makes sense, again, they're going to feel disempowered. If the software is annoying to use, they're all a little bit annoying to use. Some are better than others. But if it is annoying to use, or you don't train people on how to use it properly, that's going to get really frustrating for people. Another thing, it can be easy to game. So we've had people install little bits of software on their computers that trick the time tracking software. So it looks like they're working. So you need to know how to spot that. And you need to have a process in place to spot that. Otherwise, remember, carnage scaled equals nightmares. That becomes a nightmare. Because you think that you've got good visibility, but actually the data you're looking at isn't real. The other thing is unsure how to position it with the team to make them accepting and happy. We have 100% use of time tracking software across Exposure Ninja. Everyone in the company uses it. It's a complete non-negotiable. Okay, some people initially, when they hear about it, they're a little bit hesitant, but the way we position it with them and the way that we talk about it with them actually means that by the end, they're like, okay, yeah, that's completely fair enough. I can understand why it's necessary. Yeah. So it's all about how you position it and how you talk it through. So that's the first mistake, a lack of tracking. Just assuming that everything is going to work, things are going to work as they did in the office remotely. They will not. The second mistake that we made, that I hope you don't make, is a lack of support for the people. Okay, I found this online, the work from home expectation versus reality. Although even in the expectation, the guy's sat on his phone, isn't he? We've had people working 60 hours a week, and it turns out they're working from a sofa, right? Laptop on a sofa. If you do that for more than a few hours, you're in serious discomfort. If you do that a lot, if that is your default way of working, then you've got potential health problems. it's horrible, right? So you need to have guidelines about the remote environment. So what does a good desk setup look like? What does a good computer height look like? You might want to have support for people, with things like eye tests. You might want to give people an allowance for computer equipment like chairs and desks, that type of thing. As an employer, it's in your interest to look after these people. You are not going to get the most out of anyone who's in that reality hole as you are from the expectation hole. You need people working in an environment which is productive. We're all organic beings, right? We're not machines. In a machine, you can just put it in a corner, in a dark little dingy corner, and it'll do its job. With a human, you can't do that. That's when trouble sets in. And this is really on you. People think, when you send people home, you're like, yeah, but they'll be fine. They've got common sense. Not always. And common sense is very, very subjective. Remember, 19% of people working remotely suffer from loneliness. That's the Buffer study. A Zen business study found that people who work remotely have the highest anxiety score. 54 out of 100 for anxiety is their average score. Remember that support comes naturally in an office. So in an office, people will be bumping into each other. They'll be talking over the water cooler. Remotely, isolation comes naturally. We might not see another person for days or weeks. Some people live alone. They might never see someone else, right? Unless they go to the shop, and then there's not really proper interaction. So you need to have processes, whether it's your meeting schedule, your meeting rhythm, whether it's guidelines for when to do a video call versus when to do an audio call, that type of thing. Really important to make video calls default so people are getting some FaceTime. This is on you. As a company, this is something that you need to provide. This isn't something that will just take care of itself. Left on its own, isolation will rule. So call and meeting schedules, buddy systems, things like that, video first, call guidelines, all that type of thing can help reduce this, right? And we've had to put in place all those types of things to make sure that people don't suffer from isolation. Okay, next mistake, chaotic communication. This is my favorite one. So I've seen a lot of really interesting, we call it interesting, remote work implementations. For example, people whose main method of communication is phone calls. In a remote environment, that is an absolute disaster for so many reasons. Firstly, the phone call, the information on the phone call is only shared between the two people on the phone. Okay, the rest of the team don't get that info. So it's all completely lost. And then you have like a Chinese whispers thing going on where people are trying to share, oh, I heard that, blah, blah, blah. Absolute chaos. Okay, I'm not saying that phone calls aren't great. Phone calls are brilliant, particularly if you're used to face-to-face or you're used to talking to people on the phone. That's fine, but there are more productive default communication methods than the phone. Definitely. The next one is email. So we've all been CC'd into email threads that we didn't need to be in. You can get people missed off. You can get sub-threads of threads, absolute chaos. And then, of course, you've got the frequency. So how often are people expected to check their emails? Are they supposed to be chained to their emails, checking them every hour? You might need that from some people, but then other people, they might not get anything done if they're always in their emails. So email is a fantastic communication method for clients or contacts or whatever, or more formal communications. But in a workspace with internal communications, it's horrific to be your primary method. The worst one I've seen is a company that tried to run remote and they were basing all of their communication on WhatsApp chats. Okay. Mostly on their phones. So the trouble with WhatsApp is none of the information is indexable. So if you need to search for something, you can't. You've got people trying to copy links from their computer to their phone and all of that type of stuff. You've got to scroll through loads and loads of rubbish. You've got different topics all being discussed in the same thing. Ugh, horrible. And then, of course, you've got the fact that people have got work stuff mixed with personal stuff inside WhatsApp. So they end up being on all the time, which is really bad for their productivity. So they're never really on, they're never really off because they're always being distracted. Oh, I've got a message from my mum as well. So I'll just reply to her and then I'll go back to... It's a complete nightmare. Much better to use something like Slack. And even with Slack, you need good hygiene methods, right? You need good hygiene principles. Otherwise, it can be complete overwhelm because, Exposure Ninja, we have different channels for each of our different clients. So we've got over 100 clients and we've got over 100 ninjas. And then we've got channels for people in different job roles. We've got channels for people with particular interests. We've got channels for people in different locations to talk. So we've got all this different stuff going on. So you need to give your team guidelines about what is and isn't acceptable. But also you need to give them the space that they can have that personal interaction with people as well. So something like Slack is a really good option for a remote company. Just be careful that it can lead to information overwhelm. But if you're going to go for information overwhelm or the opposite end of the spectrum, you'd want more information rather than less, right? So it can be fantastic. And we love Slack because it means, we've got processes in place where when a call happens, all of the notes are shared in the channel. So everyone in the company then knows the outcome from that. So we've got this principle called tell us once, which means that when we ask a client a question, everyone in the company then knows the answer to that question. So we don't need to ask it again, right? So you only have to tell us once. We wouldn't be able to do that without something like Slack, because when someone has a call with a client, they can put the information in the channel, then everyone else in that channel who works on that client can see that information. It's all there. They can scroll back earlier on, they can see what's happened, they can see the history, everything is there. So it's a really effective way of working, but you need to have guidelines in place. Okay, next mistake that we made, woeful meetings, right? You've seen this. This is the guy on... I think he's on BBC, being interviewed live on BBC News. In come the kids. And get rid. You can see his face there, the little snapshot, that, oh God, as this thing just rapidly descends, right? This is so many people's worst nightmare when it comes to working remotely, and particularly if you've got people doing client meetings. The illusion of professionalism that he's trying to create, he's got the world map in the background, he's got his books nicely laid out on the table beside him, all just comes crashing down. He's wearing a suit, just the whole thing's just folding in on itself before our very eyes. Then in she comes, grabbing the children out. That face. Love it. That's the danger, right? So again, it comes back to guidelines. It comes back to having a structure in place that actually your team can work from. So different types of meeting wreckage can come from things like inconsistent platform choices, whether it's internal meetings or client meetings. If you're not always consistent about the platform that you're using for the meeting, like, oh, is it a call? Is it Skype? Is it Zoom? Is it Hangout? We don't really know. Then you spend all this time faffing around at the start. So it's important to choose a platform that works for you. Whichever platform is going to depend on your priorities. We use Google Meet because it integrates with a calendar. You might use Zoom or Skype because it has blur background, whatever. But we can help you find the best platform for you. But having a very clear guideline about what platform you use is very important. Dress code and meeting etiquette. So we give our teams all guidelines on what is suitable dress code, and what sort of etiquette to follow, because in an in-person situation, there's a kind of gravity towards professionalism. I remember being on a call with a fantastic member of our team, and it was summer, and she was outside in the garden, and she looked like she was sunbathing, and we were on a client call, and I was absolutely devastated. But we didn't have any policy on that, so of course it was only a matter of time until it happened. So we built the policy, and there we go. Now we've got that, and it doesn't need to happen again. But until you have the policy, you're going to have those you're going to have those bad situations, which you've then got to kind of correct, because that wouldn't happen in an office. Poor sound or video, so giving your teams guidelines on when to choose video, when to only do sound, making sure they've got the right equipment, for example, external microphones. You don't have to spend a lot on an external microphone. The one we use is a Samsung C01U, fantastic microphone. It's about £80. We buy it for anyone who's going to be client facing. Really good sound quality, nice and easy plug and play USB. So clear meeting policies, giving your team agenda templates as well, follow-up processes in place, that type of thing. So when particularly if you're meeting with clients remotely, you need to you don't get the in-person connection piece. If you're going to appear professional, you need to do more, basically. You need to be better in a remote environment than you can be in an in-person environment. You know those salespeople in particular, sorry to pick on the salespeople, you know those salespeople that can talk they can talk for England or wherever they live, right? And they can go into a client meeting completely unprepared and they can just rely on rapport to get through that. Well, remote, you can't really do that. So having things like agenda templates, which you give your teams to work through, having a clear policy on what happens with the notes afterwards, all of that builds that rapport and makes the client seriously impressed with the impression that you're giving them on these meetings, which can offset things like the fact that you're not meeting in person, or you're meeting in a space where the lighting might not be perfect, or where they're clearly in their home or whatever. So it's important to, have that structure, and also important to talk with your clients about how to position the fact that you're working remotely. Because it doesn't need to be a bad thing for them. Actually, it can be a really compelling advantage to working with your company that your team is remote, but that needs to be positioned, that needs to be talked about in a particular way. So the fifth mistake is not really a mistake. It's not embracing the opportunity that comes from remote. I know I've talked a load today about the potholes and the dangers of being remote. And for sure, they're all really serious. Losing 37% of your productivity will eventually destroy your business. There's not really, unless you've got ridiculous margins, there's not really many businesses that can survive with that. But on the flip side of it, getting this stuff right can be a serious level up for your company. And here's why. Exposure Ninja would not be the scale it is without remote working. So really, this could be the best thing about being remote. Let me talk about some of the benefits of getting this stuff right and scaling a remote company. The first one is huge. So if you're in an office, let me tell you a story. So when we had a very short-lived office experiment where we moved into an office in Long Eaton in Nottingham. And we were there for about 6 months before we decided it's really not for us. When we needed to hire someone, say we needed to hire someone to work on pay-per-click campaigns, we would put an ad out with a, say, 5-10 mile radius around the office, looking for people who are good at pay-per-click. And we'd get a handful of applicants, and then we'd have to pick one of the handful. Well, when we're remote, if we need a pay-per-click person, we can hire anybody in the world, right? As long as they're good at pay-per-click, as long as they're native in the language that they're going to be, their native level in the language that they're going to be writing ads in or talking to clients in. As long as they are really good at what they do, they work hard, they match all the cultural criteria of working with Exposure Ninja and, we get along with them and all that type of stuff. We can hire from anywhere in the world. That gives us an unlimited global talent pool. We've got people that have ex-Google. We've got people that used to be high up in, large corporations working at Exposure Ninja because we can hire anyone. Because there are so many advantages of a remote lifestyle for people that you'll be able to hire way better people than you are if you're trying to get them in an office space. So 2 things. Firstly, that's brilliant for you. Secondly, as more people now are familiar with working remotely, if you have a remote company and you're set up and you're running well without that 37% drop in productivity, you're going to be in a position where you can poach fantastic people from your competitors because you can offer them a work environment that they're going to have fallen in love with during this remote time. So it's a massive, massive advantage. I cannot get over this. We can sometimes get 1,000 applicants for a job that we post. Well, if we were in an office, we might get 15. So the difference in quality that you're able to hire is huge. You no longer have to make do with the best people in a 5-mile radius from your postcode. You can hire people from anywhere. It's unbelievable. The quality of your team, the quality of the people that you'll be able to bring on will blow your mind once you open up your hiring pool to everyone in the world. You also get access to talent that would never be able to work in an office. So even if they're local focused, right? So we've got one of our management team is the ex-manager of the Boots website. So that's huge, right? We've got clients who the manager for their website used to manage boots.com. Well, for her, she's got children. She really wants to be at home to see the children grow up, because that only happens once. I'm exactly the same. My little boy's 2. I'm conscious that he's never going to be 2 again. Every day is precious. I want to be around to see that. And if I had to leave the house every day to go and work in an office, that would be a deal breaker for me. And the same with Vic from Boots, right? That would be a deal breaker for her. But we can bring her on in Exposure Ninja. We can make use of her amazing talent, her brilliant skill, and we can work with her. Now, we'd never have access. If we need to say, Vic, you need to come into the office and work 9 to 5, wouldn't even be a conversation. That's nothing that she could do, because she wants to be there for the kids, because the kids are our greatest project, right? So, yeah, you get access to a whole host of talent, particularly working parents, that you would never, ever get if you were forcing them to work in an office. And that also makes them much, much happier as well. It's faster to scale. If we need to bring on 10 people for a particular job role in 2 weeks, we could do that because we've got this unlimited talent pool. We're hiring people that would never be able to work in an office. Brilliant. Overheads lower. This is the thing that everyone goes to with remote work. They see the cost of the office lease and all of the, the taxes and the utilities and the toilet roll and the beer for the fridge and all that type of stuff, and they think, wow, my balance sheet would look a lot stronger if it wasn't for all of that crap. Well, that's definitely true, but I actually think that's actually one of the smaller benefits, is the fact that you've got lower overheads. The bigger benefits are the talent. A better quality of life, again, if you've got the framework in place to give the team support. If we've got people in Exposure Ninja that love their animals and their pets, and they'll go and walk their dog at lunchtime. That's fantastic. If you're walking in a field with your dog, when you come back to work, you're going to be really absolutely on it. Whereas if you're just slumped in a grey cubicle with fluorescent lighting in the middle of an industrial estate in Burnley, it's a different experience of life, isn't it? It's a really different experience of life. So you're giving people the opportunity. It's like free range versus battery, right? We know that a free range hen is happier, and yet we expect our employees, our teams, to be battery. It doesn't make any sense. Improved health. They can live the life that they want. They can construct their environment in a way that's optimized for them rather than optimized for office. And there's no politics, office cake, or messy romances. If people aren't bumping into each other, they're not bumping into each other, right? So it saves you a lot of HR nightmares. So again, I'd ask you, what is it worth to you getting this right? So just think about the reduction in productivity if you don't focus on this stuff. If you just organically go remote, you just give your people a laptop and send them off on their way, give them Slack and Zoom and just see what happens. So you got that 37% reduction in productivity. But on the plus side, if you get it right, you get all of these. So what is that worth to you as an opportunity? I genuinely believe this is a pivot point in your business where you can decide to build out the remote side of things, and you can decide to make this, whether it's your default or whether you just have an enhanced remote component to your work. There might be some people that work in an office, or you might give people the opportunity to be remote 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days a week or whatever. But what's this worth, getting all of this stuff right to your organization, even just in the next year? For Exposure Ninja, we've spent millions getting this wrong. Millions getting it wrong. If I'd have known what I know now in 2013, my God, there is no price I wouldn't have paid for that info, for the lessons that have been learned. So I'm really interested to know. So if you're watching this live, you can drop a comment in the chat, and I'm just really curious to know what you think over the next year getting this right could be worth to your company, either in reduction in wastage or in taking advantage of all those great things, hiring better people, hiring from, other places that are other than the UK, reduction office overheads, happier, healthier team. It's massive. This is absolutely massive. It is going to be a revolution. So how can we help? Well, we wanted to do everything that we could to help companies go through this. Obviously, I've shown you the 5 mistakes that we've made over the years. I've given you some tidbits and some suggested solutions. There's loads to this, and it goes back to the thing about we don't necessarily know what we don't know until we come across that problem. So what we've done is we've actually put together a course called Remote Working Revolution. Now, in Remote Working Revolution, myself and the senior team at Exposure Ninja have been through every aspect of setting up, running, and scaling a remote organization. Okay, so everything that we've learned, the processes that we've put in place, the templates that we've got, we share it all. So we share templates, processes, and walkthroughs. We'll show you the software to use. We'll show you how to make sure people don't take advantage. We'll show you how to make sure people are healthy. We'll show you how to make sure your team are productive. We'll show you how to make sure they don't take advantage of the situation. We'll show you how to hire, onboard, train remotely. It's massive. We share everything that we've learned. This is going to save you a whole bunch of time getting this stuff through trial and error, right? Just the hiring and onboarding process. Like I said, if we knew then what we know now, my gosh, the team, we would definitely not have made some of the hires that we've made over the years. And some of the amazing people that we're able to bring on now as a result of our hiring and onboarding process, we would never have had previously because we weren't recruiting for that. We didn't know what to look for. We didn't know the warning signs to look for when you're recruiting a remote person. And we didn't have the training and onboarding process to get the most out of those people either. It'll save you a ton of money. Just imagine that you lose 1 productive hour per person in your organization every day. So that's 5 hours per person per week. That's 250 hours per person per year. And that's on the low side. You might be losing 2, 3. If you're losing 37%, then you might be losing 3 hours per person per day across the entire organization. What does that cost you, right? It's mental, ludicrous. But at the same time, we've got people in Exposure Ninja, when we asked them to rate their productivity at EN versus their previous company, because of the structure and framework we've got, the average answer was we expect a 3x productivity increase from being remote if you give them the framework to thrive in. So as well as saving money, you're going to be making more money because you've got your team working so much more productive. So this is massive. And save your team, their health, their well-being. If you can save 2 people from having anxiety-related issues because of working in isolation, what is that worth to them and what's that worth to you? Huge. So we've built this course out, which shows you how to do all of this stuff, and it's designed to get you these results, okay? It's brand new. We were going to release it later in the year. We had it all planned. We had everything scheduled, and then COVID-19 hit. We saw all these people sending their teams home, and we thought we need to bring this forward. So we spent a couple of crazy weeks mapping out everything that we learned, sharing everything. It was my top priority. I was just wall to wall recording tutorials and working out how we can share the stuff that we've done most effectively. That means it's completely brand new, right? Completely brand new. So I need your help. We want to make this the very best course in the world for building, running, and scaling a remote organization. The best in the world. That is our threshold. So in order to do that, we need testimonials and we need feedback from people who have implemented this system into their business, so that you can give us a testimonial and say, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. This is completely revolutionized. We didn't know what we were missing out on. Productivity has gone up. We're tracking these things. We've got a clear read on what our team's productivity actually is for the first time ever. And that's a really useful benchmark that's been able to help us see progress, or, whatever. We've built Exposure Ninja on the success stories of our clients, and we need to build this course on the success story of the people that go through it. But because it's brand new, we don't have those success stories yet. So what we're looking for is we're looking for a small group of businesses that can take this for a test drive, run through it, implement the systems in their business just like we do, follow the steps that we show you how to do, and then give us a testimonial about the impact that it's made. Okay, so we're not forcing people to say, this is an absolute game changer if it hasn't been. We just want that testimony. We want the feedback, completely honest, so that we can use it to either work on the course or promote the course to other people later on. So in order to do that, we're going to be offering a discount to this small test group. It's like a beta, where we're offering it to people to get started with in return for a testimonial. So that's the condition of getting the beta pricing. So who is this for? Well, it's for people that have a team. If you're working solo, there's not really that much that you need to do, because if you can't motivate yourself, then it's not really going to happen. So this is for people that have a team. So you're either a manager or you're the business owner, or you're planning to build a team and you want to make sure you've got this stuff in place first. Right? But this isn't for people that are just like, you're a solo consultant or whatever, you've got no plans to grow the business. There's limited value to it for you. People who are fully remote or have a combination of remote and in person. The question that we often get is, but when this whole coronavirus thing is over, we're going to go back to working in office some of the time, but actually we love the benefits of working remotely, so we're going to have half and half. Perfect. The key is to have a framework in place so that when people are working remotely, they're still keeping up with what's in the office, and vice versa. And we'll show you how to do that in the course. This is not for people that think remote work just means put everyone on a Zoom call each week, right? The Slack and Zoom crew. Yeah, Slack, we got Zoom. Brilliant. We are remote. Let's go. Okay, that's unconscious incompetence squared. Okay, just like working in an office requires guidelines, it requires etiquette, it requires a framework, so does working remote, just as important. So if you've got a team, if you're fully remote or you're going to be working on a combination of remote and in the office, and you appreciate that there is more to working remote than just a couple of bits of software and a laptop for your team, then Remote Working Revolution, you are the person that we've designed this for. So there's two options to get access to the course. So here they are. The one on the left is a training and consultancy package. So as well as getting the course, you also get 4 hours of consultancy to talk through one of our team as you start implementing this in your business. So we'll be helping you with specific questions that you have about an element of the course, about how to get it built into your team. Something that's particular to your business that you want to talk through. We'll be able to brainstorm whether we can give you something from an Inside Exposure Ninja, like a task list, or we can match you up with someone else from the HR department or finance or whatever the question is around. Then that's what that consultancy is for. We're also giving the training and consultancy, we're sharing 20 team licenses included. So a team license is this is a license that you can give to your team so that they can go through the elements of the training that are most relevant for them. So there's two versions of Remote Working Revolution. There's a version for the manager or the owner, which shows you how to build the processes, how to get the tracking and stuff. And then there's the one for the team, which basically takes them through the well-being stuff. It takes them through the productivity stuff, how to prioritize their time, that type of stuff. So that's designed to plug into them to make them a more effective remote worker. And you get the one which is designed to build a remote company, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in that you wouldn't necessarily need your team to go through. So you get 20 licenses for your team to go through that, so that they've been through that, and then whether it's like a compliance thing or whether it's to show them that you're invested in their well-being and their productivity. As you go remote, you get 20 licenses included at no additional charge as part of the training and consultancy. So the regular price on that is going to be $2,295, but if you're willing to give us a testimonial, doesn't need to be a positive testimonial, just a testimonial, an honest testimonial, then $1,499 is the price. These are all excluding VAT, of course. If you just want the training, you just want the course, you don't need the consultancy, then you get the video training course, you get 5 licenses for your team, and rather than the regular $799, which is the price once we've collected the testimonials, the small group get the testimonial offer at $500 plus VAT. If you need more licenses, of course, you can talk to us. If you're interested in going ahead, by the way, there's a button on this page where you can book a consultancy with one of the team to talk about it. Make sure that you're going for the right option for you. If you just want to go ahead and buy, then you'll see a button where you can just go ahead and buy. Okay, so that's the price points and that's what you get. I just wanted to actually show you behind the scenes so you can see actually what's in the course itself. So when you log in and you get access to the course, this is what you're going to get. So each of these are different sections. So this is obviously the leader. This is the leader version of the course, not the team version. The team version is much smaller and quicker for people to go through. It's only the stuff that's most relevant to them. So we've got these different sections: managing and leading a remote business, how to structure a remote team, how to build and develop a remote company culture. That's really important. Communication, internal communication, and also we've got some interviews with ninjas from Exposure Ninja where we talk about what communication is actually like on a day-to-day basis, so you can hear from people who've been through this and live this on a daily basis. You've got tracking and managing work, really important section there. You've got security, so how to maintain security in a remote environment where everyone might be using their own devices. You've got no idea, how people are accessing software and stuff like that. Section on productivity, really important. We show you all of the productivity templates that we use. Getting the most of your team, performance management. So we've got 4 different lessons inside there about how to manage a team and how to run KPI meetings, how to make sure that your team are performing at the level you need. Hiring, onboarding and training, really important section, loads in there as well. Well-being, so we've got some focus on that. We also share the templates that we use so you can send these out to your team, the well-being checklists. How to find and connect with clients, so how to actually build a remote sales operation and how to automate a lot of that, how to run those meetings, how to manage clients as well, so how to talk to and position. We talk about customer and client communication and how to have meetings and things like that, and then how meetings work. And then we also give you some remote working resources, including getting started with going remote. So this is like your quick start guide. So that's everything. Now, the thing is structured so that you don't need to go through everything immediately. Okay, you can pick and choose, you can cherry pick the stuff that's most right for you. If you don't need to hire right now, there's no point going through the hiring and onboarding stuff. When you do, great, it's there, but you don't need to go through it right now. So it's about choosing the stuff that's most relevant for you now, and then the other stuff you can go through at a later point or when that stuff comes up. So that's what's included. So to get started, you can click on the book consultancy button to talk to us. You'll talk to one of the team. They can answer any questions that you might have about the remote transition. They can also talk through what's included in the course, or you can just go ahead and buy now, wherever you feel like you're at. So that's Remote Working Revolution. I hope that you're excited by the possibilities. I genuinely believe this is going to absolutely transform. I was being interviewed for an article on maybe Forbes about remote working. And the question was, what do you think about the trend of remote working? Or something where it positioned remote working as a trend. And I thought about it and realized actually remote working isn't a trend at all. Office work was a trend, right? Our ancestors didn't go to a central office to work. They might have gone to a farm or a plantation or something, or, they might have worked around their home. But they didn't go to a central factory. People only started going to factories in the Industrial Revolution when, there was a machine and they needed to operate the machine. So they had to go into factories, and then people start living in cities. Well, now we've got the internet, we don't need to go into a factory anymore. That doesn't actually make sense. It's not optimal for productivity if it's managed correctly, and it's certainly not optimal for well-being. So, yeah, I think we'll look back at office work and realise that actually it didn't need to be the way that it was, and that remote work, if it's managed properly with the right framework, is a much, much more compelling alternative. So click on the button to book the consultancy to talk to us or buy it now. If you've got any questions at all, then book the consultancy and we'll answer those questions in the consultancy. Until next time, see you soon.